So I found my way to NYCLU's training actually through connecting with a community organizing group. A couple organizations that were organizing the Close Rikers campaign. And so I had been showing up to their community organizing meetings since about June, knowing there was a large march being planned for September. And they decided they wanted to bring in NYCLU to do a protest monitor training. So that was kind of my foray into getting this training. And I'm kind of glad that was my route in, was being actually connected to a particular issue area and group, because it provided more broad support than just being like, oh, I'm an individual monitor getting dropped into, you know, some event or something. And great now that I have this skill if I want to take it somewhere else. Part of the reason I think it's helpful to be connected to an organizing group in addition to the training, I was at a demonstration for Standing Rock down at Foley Square a couple nights ago that had, part of it was permitted, but part was not permitted, and they had done a big training for their folks the night before about what to expect in that context. And the context does change, you know, for every single event. So while you'll have your kind of core knowledge as a protest monitor, I think being connected to the organizers to hear what they're thinking about and concerned about, to know the organizers personally, because they'll be playing roles that might cross over with yours here and there. So anyway, I just think it's important to broaden beyond just your NYCLU training. And so the experience, you know, the training was, you know, about an hour, just with Joanna, and we just kind of went through the Know Your Rights packet and what's in there so that we could communicate that to folks. And then just kind of what to expect in the context of this particular march, which was permitted. We weren't expecting a lot in terms of conflict or issues, and that turned out to be true. And, you know, just kind of got our bearings. And so the way it kind of worked in practice was we all arrived, you know, about an hour before the march, met up with each other. I think we had about 5, maybe, or 6 protest monitors there for a march that had about 500 people, just contextualize that. You know, really, the name is kind of intuitive, right? You're there to really monitor what's happening and be kind of at the front lines of recording things to be able to kind of continue to promote, you know, transparency around First Amendment rights, and in some ways, too, to be a deterrent force. You know, when the police see you there in your NYCLU gear, in your red hat, and you're observing, right? It just creates kind of a natural air of deterrence as well that I think is valuable. And so we work in pairs generally, and, you know, as Joanna mentioned, you're using some sort of communication app that allows you to just share information that's happening. And so, you know, in my case, was using my phone just to be able to track things and really looking for some of the obvious things, right? Like, obviously, if there's any sort of conflict, arrest, harassment, you know, any sort of verbal abuse, looking for that. Also paying attention for whether or not, you know, barricades or blocking of, you know, access for the protesters is happening. That's not in line with what was set up in advance. If there is any sort of harassment of people because they're recording what's going on, or journalists who are present, any sort of bag searches, stop and frisks. You kind of have your list, right, of things that you know you should just be keeping an eye out for. And then you just kind of err on the side of record first and like edit later. So don't wait until it's kind of like, all right, this looks bad, and where's my phone? And just any time I saw that there was going to be some kind of conversation coming up, I would just kind of pull up my phone, have it ready to record. So then when it looked, oh, and just asking you to get back in line, ma'am, they do, great, okay, I don't need to send that anywhere. You're also not just there kind of silently observing, you can kind of be engaged. So introducing yourself to the police who are there monitoring so they know who you are, that, you know, you can kind of present yourself as someone who can say, hey, you know, if there's any issues you're noticing with our protesters that, you know, are causing problems, let me know. I'm happy to communicate that. And so you can in some ways create a little bit of a buffer or make them feel like they're not, you know, the police are the only ones communicating even what needs to be done. So trying to create that air of, you know, just calmness, and we're here to help. On the flip side, talking to the protesters, hearing what they're experiencing, letting them know how they can share information that they have, you know, so you want to be in dialogue. It's not your job to intervene when you see something happen, putting your body in terms of in between, you know, conflict or anything. You're there recording. There may be other people there who have de-escalation training to do that, but that's not the role of the protest monitor specifically. So yeah, that's the large and short of it. I think you're kind of recording, you know, phone, video, or just taking notes. Make sure you're accurate around time. If you do see a conflict with the police, consider getting the name and the badge number, which they are required to provide if you ask for that, and just have that all tracked. You can send things in real time. You should have kind of a lead person in your relay of information you're sharing, who you would send stuff to in real time, or you can be sending stuff into NYCLU after the fact too. And Joanna can talk a little bit about what they do with some of that information that's gathered at these protests. And yeah, so a lot of it's kind of learning through experience. I definitely would suggest if you're looking to be connected with community organizers who are doing this work, it's definitely a great way to show up and be concrete and being helpful in what they're trying to do, and yeah, a great way to get involved. So.